I'm 52 years old, a labor and delivery nurse for 25 years. I've seen thousands of pregnancies. I know what pregnancy looks like. When my son's fiancée said she was 5 months pregnant and showed absolutely no signs of it, every professional instinct started screaming something was wrong. Her name is Jade. She's 26, dating my son Brett for 8 months. They got engaged fast. 2 months after engagement, Jade announced at family dinner that she was pregnant. Brett was shocked but happy. I congratulated them while my nurse brain calculated timelines and asked questions. Jade said she was 8 weeks along. I asked when her first appointment was. She was vague. I asked which OB she was seeing. She hadn't chosen one yet. At 8 weeks, she should have already confirmed pregnancy with ultrasound. Over following weeks, I watched Jade perform pregnancy. Morning sickness only when Brett was watching. Claims of exhaustion, but social media showed her out late. No real ultrasound photos ever posted. 20 weeks, 5 months. Jade came to family dinner. I've seen thousands of women at 20 weeks. There's a visible bump. Jade looked exactly the same. I started asking medical questions. When was her anatomy scan? Had she felt the baby move? Jade got defensive. Said I was interrogating her. Brett told me to stop questioning his fiancée. I decided to investigate carefully. Before I could, Jade called a family meeting. She'd had a miscarriage. Lost the baby. Brett was devastated. Everyone rallied around Jade. The wedding, planned for 6 months away, suddenly moved up to 8 weeks. Jade needed something happy to focus on. I was trapped. I couldn't voice suspicions about a pregnancy that supposedly no longer existed without looking like a monster who doesn't believe miscarriage. But my professional instinct screamed, there was never a pregnancy to lose. If you've ever known something was wrong but couldn't say it without looking like the villain, leave a comment. Subscribe if you believe that sometimes the cruelest manipulation is the kind that uses sympathy as a weapon. Let me tell you how I discovered my son's fiancée faked a pregnancy and a miscarriage to trap him into marriage. I've been a labor and delivery nurse for 25 years at Regional Medical Center. I've delivered over 3,000 babies, seen every complication, every high-risk pregnancy, every variation of normal and abnormal. When you spend a quarter-century in labor and delivery, you develop instincts about pregnancy that go beyond medical training. You can spot a woman who's actually pregnant versus one who's performing pregnancy symptoms. My son Brett is 29, a software developer, the kind of young man who still calls his mother every Sunday and shows up for family dinners without being asked. He's always been romantic, traditional, wanted the whole package: marriage, kids, white picket fence. Through his 20s, he dated casually, but never seriously until Jade. He met her 8 months ago through a work connection. She's 26, works as an administrative assistant at a tech company near his office. From their first date, it was intense. She pursued him aggressively, constant texts, surprise visits to his apartment, love-bombing him with affection and attention. Within 2 months, she'd moved half her belongings into his place. Within 4 months, she was talking about marriage and babies. I met Jade for the first time at a Sunday dinner 6 months ago. She was pretty, charming when she wanted to be, said all the right things. But something felt off to me immediately. The way she mirrored Brett perfectly, suddenly loved everything he loved, agreed with everything he said. The way she asked detailed questions about our family finances disguised as getting to know you conversation. How much did Brett make? What was his inheritance going to be? Did we own our house outright? My husband Richard thought I was being overprotective. Our daughter Amy, Brett's 25-year-old sister, admitted she got weird vibes from Jade, but didn't want to say anything and seemed jealous or petty. Brett proposed after 6 months of dating. Fast, but he said when you know, you know. I tried gently suggesting maybe they should wait a bit, get to know each other better. Brett got defensive immediately. Said I didn't like Jade because she wasn't good enough for me, because I wanted to control his life. I backed off. I didn't want to alienate my son. The wedding was planned for 8 months away, a spring wedding. Jade immediately took over all the planning, making expensive choices, expecting Richard and me to pay for half of everything even though traditionally the bride's family handles most wedding costs. Then, 2 months after the engagement, came the pregnancy announcement. It was a Sunday dinner at our house. Richard had grilled steaks. Amy brought wine. Brett and Jade arrived together, Jade holding Brett's hand tightly. Halfway through dinner, Jade started crying. She said she had news. She was scared but also happy. She was pregnant. Brett's face showed he was as surprised as the rest of us. But he adapted quickly, his shock transforming into excitement within seconds. Richard got up and hugged Brett, congratulating him. Amy hugged Jade. I congratulated them too, automatically, while my brain immediately went into nurse mode. Jade said she was 8 weeks along. 8 weeks meant she'd gotten pregnant shortly after the engagement, possibly before. I asked when her first prenatal appointment was scheduled. Jade said she hadn't scheduled one yet. I asked which OB she planned to see. She said she was still researching doctors, hadn't chosen. This was my first red flag. At 8 weeks pregnant, most women have already had their first appointment. That's when pregnancy is officially confirmed via ultrasound, when dating is established, when prenatal care begins. I offer to give her names of excellent OB/GYNs I work with, colleagues I trust. Jade declined. Said she wanted to find her own doctor, do her own research. I asked what prenatal vitamins she was taking. She said she was taking them but couldn't name the brand. I asked if she was experiencing morning sickness. She said yes, terrible nausea, could barely keep food down. But I just watched her eat a full steak dinner without any sign of nausea. Over the next several weeks, I watched Jade's performance carefully. She'd post on social media about pregnancy symptoms, exhaustion, food cravings, morning sickness. But her posts were generic, stock phrases, nothing specific or personal. She never posted actual ultrasound photos, never mentioned her doctor by name, never shared real details about prenatal appointments, at family gatherings. Jade would clutch her stomach and mention nausea, but only when Brett or other family members were watching. I'd see her eating sushi and drinking coffee, things most pregnant women avoid or can't tolerate. She'd complain about exhaustion, but her social media showed her out at bars late at night with friends. I started documenting inconsistencies in my head. At what she claimed was 12 weeks, Jade said her morning sickness was getting worse. But she'd just posted photos from a wine tasting event. At 16 weeks, she said she was finally getting her energy back. But she showed no physical changes whatsoever. No pregnancy glow, no thickening around her middle, nothing. The biggest red flag came at 20 weeks. Jade came to Sunday dinner claiming to be 5 months pregnant. I'm a labor and delivery nurse. I've seen thousands of women at 20 weeks gestation. By 5 months, there's a visible baby bump that can't be hidden. The body changes in specific ways, thickening waist, rounder face, change in posture. Jade looked exactly the same as the day I'd met her 6 months earlier. Exactly the same that I tried asking careful questions over dinner. Had she had her anatomy scan yet? That's standard at 20 weeks, when they check the baby's development and can determine gender. Jade said she'd had it. Everything looked perfect. I asked if she knew if she was having a boy or girl. She said they were waiting to be surprised. I asked if she'd started feeling the baby move yet. Quickening, the first fetal movements, typically happens between 16 and 20 weeks for first pregnancies. It's one of the most exciting milestones. Jade said yes, she'd felt little flutters. But when I asked her to describe what it felt like, she gave a vague generic answer that sounded like she'd Googled it. I asked about her doctor visits, how often she was going. She said everything was going well, the doctor was pleased. But she couldn't name the doctor. Said she saw whoever was available at the practice. Brett noticed my questions and got defensive. Told me to stop interrogating Jade about her pregnancy, that I was making her uncomfortable. Jade put her hand on her flat stomach and said quietly that she was a private person about medical things, that she'd share more when she was ready. I was trapped. I couldn't ask normal, reasonable medical questions without being accused of being intrusive or not trusting her. But as a medical professional, I knew what I was seeing. Or rather, what I wasn't seeing. No physical signs of pregnancy. No real medical details. No actual evidence beyond her word that she was pregnant. I talked to Richard privately that night. Told him something was wrong with Jade's pregnancy, that the medical details didn't add up. Richard suggested maybe I was being overprotective, maybe I just didn't like Jade and was looking for reasons to doubt her. He said maybe Jade carried small, maybe she was private about medical information, maybe I was letting my dislike of her cloud my professional judgment that I started doubting myself. Was I being unfair? Was I letting my uneasy feelings about Jade make me see problems that weren't there? I'm a medical professional, but I'm also a mother who wasn't thrilled about her son's rushed engagement. I talked to Amy about my concerns. She admitted she'd been suspicious too. Said Jade's pregnancy seemed performative, that she'd noticed Jade only showed symptoms when Brett was around. Amy had also noticed that Jade's close friends from work hadn't posted any congratulations, hadn't thrown a baby shower, hadn't done any of the normal things friends do when someone's pregnant. Amy tried talking to Brett about concerns, gently suggesting maybe he should go to a prenatal appointment with Jade, be more involved in the pregnancy. Brett shut her down immediately. Said Jade handled the medical stuff, that she didn't want him hovering, that Amy was just jealous of his happiness like I was. Jade had successfully isolated Brett from anyone who questioned her. Made us the problem. Made our concerns seem like attacks on her. I decided I needed to investigate properly. Not as a suspicious future mother-in-law, but as a medical professional verifying facts. I planned to ask Jade for her OB's name, tell her I wanted to send over my medical records and history since pregnancy can have hereditary factors. Once I had the doctor's name, I could verify she was actually receiving prenatal care. If she was really pregnant, there would be records, appointments, ultrasounds on file. I scheduled a coffee date with Jade for the following week. Casual, friendly, just us. I'd ask for the information then. But 2 days before that scheduled coffee, Brett called. He was crying. Jade had lost the baby. She'd had a miscarriage. Brett called from the hospital. At least, that's what he said. Jade had started cramping and bleeding. They'd rushed to the emergency room, and the doctors confirmed she'd miscarried. He was sobbing on the phone, devastated, asking if I could come. I said of course, I'd be there right away. Which hospital? I asked. He paused, said Jade wanted privacy, just family there, meaning him, that I should stay home and he'd call later with updates. That pause bothered me. A son calling his nurse mother about a medical emergency usually wants her there, especially for something as traumatic as miscarriage. But I didn't push. Told him I loved him, that I was here if he needed anything. Richard and I sat at home that evening waiting for updates. None came. I called Brett around 9, no answer. I texted, no response. Finally, around 11, Brett texted back. Home now. Jade resting. We'll talk tomorrow. The next day, Brett came over without Jade. He looked exhausted, red-eyed from crying. He said Jade was devastated, couldn't talk to anyone, just wanted to be alone. The baby was gone. They'd been so excited, had started planning the nursery, and now nothing did. I held my son while he cried. Asked careful questions as a nurse. What did the doctors say? How far along was she when she miscarried? Would she need a D&C procedure? Brett didn't have answers. Said Jade talked to the doctors, handled everything. He just held her hand and tried to support her. I asked which hospital they'd gone to. Brett said he couldn't remember the name. It was wherever was closest. Jade directed the Uber driver. Asked if they'd done an ultrasound at the ER. Brett said he thought so, but he wasn't in the room. Jade wanted privacy for the exam. Every answer raised more questions. But I couldn't interrogate my grieving son. I told him how sorry I was, that miscarriage is heartbreaking, that they'd get through this together. After Brett left, I sat at the kitchen table with Richard. Told him something wasn't right about this miscarriage. Richard said I was being insensitive, that our son just lost his baby, and I was looking for problems. I said I wasn't looking for problems. I was seeing medical impossibilities that a woman doesn't go to the emergency room for miscarriage and not know which hospital. She doesn't let her partner leave, not knowing what hospital he can tell family. She doesn't refuse to let her partner's nurse mother come help during a medical emergency. Richard told me to let it go. Jade had just been through trauma. I needed to be supportive, not suspicious. But I'm a nurse. I've seen real pregnancy loss hundreds of times. I know what miscarriage looks like, how it's treated, what the process involves. And nothing about Jade's story matched reality, and I called the 3 closest hospitals to Brett's apartment. Used my professional credentials to ask if they'd treated a patient named Jade for miscarriage in the past 24 hours. None of them had any record, and I called 4 more hospitals in the area. Nothing. No record of Jade being treated anywhere for miscarriage. That I sat with that information for 2 days. Told myself maybe she'd gone to an urgent care, maybe she'd seen her private OB, maybe there were records I couldn't access. But urgent cares don't handle miscarriages. They'd send her to an ER. And she supposedly didn't have an OB yet. Amy came over that week. She'd been doing her own investigation online. Found that you can buy fake positive pregnancy tests on dozens of websites. Found sites selling realistic-looking fake ultrasound images you can customize with any name and date. Found forums where women discussed using fake pregnancies to trap boyfriends that I told Amy to stop. That was too dark, too cynical. Our son's fiancée wouldn't fake a pregnancy. Wouldn't fake losing a baby. That was sociopathic, but Amy pulled up Jade's social media from the past months. Pointed out that Jade had posted generic pregnancy content, but never a single real ultrasound photo. Never checked in at a doctor's office. Never tagged or mentioned an OB/GYN. Her pregnancy existed only in vague social media posts and claims to family that I started looking more carefully at what Jade had actually shown us. Brett said she'd texted him a photo of a positive pregnancy test when she first found out. I asked if he still had that photo. He showed me. The test was sitting on a bathroom counter, no hand holding it. Generic bathroom, nothing personal or identifying. Exactly the kind of photo you'd find if you Googled positive pregnancy test. Brett said Jade had shown him an ultrasound photo on her phone. I asked if he still had a copy. He didn't. She'd shown him once, he hadn't thought to save it. I did something I'm not proud of. I went through Brett's apartment when he wasn't home. Amy had a key from when she cat-sat last year. I told myself I was looking for medical records, for proof of prenatal care, for evidence this was real. That I found trash bags by the door ready to go out. Brett had mentioned Jade was cleaning out painful reminders. I looked through those bags. Inside, I found an unopened box of pregnancy tests. Found a fake positive test still in its wrapper, the kind sold online that shows positive without being used on actual urine. Found a printed ultrasound image that looked professional but had no hospital letterhead, no doctor's name, no patient information. Just a generic ultrasound image with Baby Miller typed at the bottom. That I took photos of everything with my phone. Put the trash back exactly as I'd found it. Left before Brett came home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I had evidence of fake pregnancy materials in Jade's trash. But what did it prove? Maybe she'd bought tests before, maybe the fake positive was old, maybe the ultrasound printout was just a bad quality copy. Richard said I was reaching, seeing what I wanted to see because I didn't like Jade. But then Amy found something that changed everything. She'd been digging through Jade's social media history, going back years. Found posts from 2 years ago mentioning a boyfriend named Marcus. Found photos of Jade with Marcus, happy couple pictures. Then found posts about being pregnant, about planning a wedding. Then posts about miscarriage and grief. Amy found Marcus on social media and sent him a message. Said she had questions about someone he used to date. Marcus responded immediately. Said he had a lot to say about Jade. That we met Marcus at a coffee shop 2 days later. He was 31, seemed normal and stable, worked in accounting. He said when Amy reached out asking about Jade, he'd actually been relieved. He'd wanted to warn someone but didn't know how to find Jade's current boyfriend. Marcus told us he'd dated Jade for 6 months 2 years ago. 4 months in, Jade announced she was pregnant. Marcus proposed, felt it was the right thing. They started planning a wedding. But Marcus's mother, also a nurse, got suspicious when Jade showed no pregnancy signs and was vague about medical care. Before Marcus's mother could investigate, Jade announced she'd miscarried. Marcus was devastated. Felt guilty for ever doubting. Stayed with Jade out of grief and obligation for another 6 months. After they finally broke up, Marcus's mother found evidence in Jade's social media and trash. Fake pregnancy test. Fake ultrasound image downloaded from the internet. No record of any prenatal care or hospital treatment for miscarriage. Marcus confronted Jade. She denied everything, said he was calling her a liar about losing their baby, made him seem like a monster. He left but felt guilty for years. Marcus showed us his text messages from 2 years ago. Screenshots of Jade's pregnancy announcement to him. Photos she'd sent of ultrasounds. The ultrasound images looked identical to the one I'd found in Brett's trash, generic ultrasound photo with a name typed at the bottom. Marcus said Jade had a pattern. Get into relationship, announce pregnancy quickly, use it to push for engagement, then miscarry before anyone could verify the pregnancy was real. The fake miscarriage gave her sympathy, made it impossible to question her, and locked in the relationship because the guy felt too guilty to leave after losing their baby. I asked Marcus why he was willing to tell us this. He said he'd felt guilty for 2 years, thinking maybe he'd been wrong about Jade. Maybe his mother had pushed him to believe something that wasn't true. But now, hearing she was doing it again to someone else, he knew it had been real. Knew she'd faked it. And he couldn't let another guy go through what he went through. We had testimony from an ex-boyfriend. We had photos of fake pregnancy materials. We had no hospital records. We had medical inconsistencies I documented as a nurse. But Brett was marrying Jade in 6 weeks. And she'd just lost their baby. How do you tell your son his fiancée faked a pregnancy and faked a miscarriage? At 52, I've handled difficult conversations. I've told parents their baby didn't make it. But telling my son his fiancée faked a pregnancy and miscarriage? I had no framework for that. Richard thought I should go to Brett immediately with everything. But I knew Brett. He was already defensive about Jade. If I came at him with accusations about his grieving fiancée, he'd shut down completely. Amy suggested a gentler approach. Point out inconsistencies, without accusations. But I tried that during the pregnancy. It backfired. I consulted Dr. Sarah Martinez, an OB/GYN I've worked with for 15 years. Showed her everything, my timeline, photos I'd found, Marcus's testimony. Sarah reviewed it carefully. Said in 20 years, she'd seen 3 cases of women faking pregnancy. Rare, but it happened. Usually motivated by desperation, keeping a relationship, trapping a partner, sometimes mental illness. Sarah said everything I documented pointed to fake pregnancy. No hospital records. No prenatal care. Physical impossibilities. Fake pregnancy materials. Previous victim with identical story. But Sarah warned, proving something didn't exist is nearly impossible. Jade would deny everything. She'd make Brett choose between his mother and his grieving fiancé. That I also consulted a family lawyer. The lawyer said reproductive coercion existed in a legal gray area. Could be fraud, but proving damages was difficult. Any legal action would require Brett's cooperation. The lawyer suggested I focus on getting Brett to verify facts himself. Ask him to check hospital records, request medical documentation. Let him discover the holes on his own. That I decided that was the approach. I'd present evidence as questions needing answers. I'd ask Brett to help me understand, to provide information that would prove me wrong. That I called Brett and asked him to coffee. Just us. I had things I wanted to talk about before the wedding. Brett was wary. Asked if this was about Jade again. I said it was about facts that didn't make sense, and I needed his help understanding them. We met at a coffee shop 2 days later. Brett looked terrible. Hadn't been sleeping. Jade was devastated about the miscarriage, barely leaving the apartment. He was exhausted and emotionally drained. That I told him I loved him. That what I was about to show him came from love, not judgment. Then I pulled out the folder that I started with the medical timeline. Showed him my notes documenting Jade's claimed pregnancy versus actual physical signs. At 20 weeks, these are the changes that happen. Here's what I observed. They don't match. Brett said maybe Jade carried small. That I showed comparison photos. Women at 20 weeks versus Jade at claimed 20 weeks. Physically impossible to be 5 months pregnant and show 0 signs. That I moved to hospital records. Asked which hospital Jade went to for miscarriage. He couldn't remember. I told him I'd called every hospital in the area. None had any record of treating Jade. Brett said maybe she went somewhere else. That I explained emergency miscarriage treatment creates records. If she was treated anywhere, there would be documentation. There isn't any. That I asked about Jade's OB/GYN. Brett couldn't name one. Asked if he'd attended prenatal appointments. He hadn't. Jade preferred handling medical stuff alone. That I asked if he'd seen actual ultrasound images. He said Jade showed him pictures on her phone, but he'd never kept copies. That I showed Brett websites selling fake ultrasounds. Showed how anyone could customize them. The images looked identical to what Jade showed him. Brett's face was pale. Said I was reaching. I pulled out photos I'd taken in his apartment. The fake positive test in trash. The printed ultrasound with no medical information. Brett stared at them. Asked where I got them. I admitted I'd gone through his trash. He was angry. How dare I? Did I said I was sorry, but these items raised questions. Why would Jade have used fake positive tests? Brett said maybe they were old. Maybe there was an explanation. Then I told him about Marcus, Jade's ex-boyfriend from 2 years ago, contacted us. Marcus had exact same experience. Pregnancy announcement, pushed for engagement, vague medical information, miscarried before verification. Brett's hands were shaking. Said I'd tracked down Jade's ex? That was insane. That I showed him Marcus's messages, screenshots, testimony. The pattern was identical. Brett put his head in his hands. Said this couldn't be happening. That I asked him gently. Did he ever see Jade take a pregnancy test? Go to a doctor with her? See medical records, hospital bills, anything official beyond her word? Brett couldn't answer. He trusted her completely. I told him I wasn't asking him to believe me. I was asking him to verify facts himself. Call hospitals. Ask Jade for her OB's name. Ask for medical records that if I was wrong, Jade could provide all of it easily. Brett was crying. Said if I was right, he'd been grieving a baby that never existed. His relationship was built on lies. That I held his hand. Told him I was sorry. But he needed to know before he married her. Brett asked what he should do. I said he needed to confront Jade. Ask directly for proof. Give her a chance to explain. Brett was terrified, but agreed he had to know. We decided he'd confront her that evening. I offered to be there. Brett said no, he needed to do this alone. But he'd call after. I went home and waited. Hours passed. No call. Finally, at 11, my phone rang. Brett? He'd confronted Jade. Asked for her doctor's name, hospital records, medical documentation. Jade refused. Said he was calling her a liar. Said he was attacking her while she grieved. Said his family poisoned him against her. She cried, yelled, accused him of not trusting her. But she wouldn't provide proof. Wouldn't give a doctor's name. Wouldn't show hospital records. Just said he should believe her without evidence. Brett pushed. Said he needed documentation for peace of mind. Jade packed a bag and left. Said she was staying with a friend, needed space from someone who didn't believe in her. Brett asked me what he should do now. I told Brett to stay at his apartment and not contact Jade until morning. Let emotions settle. We'd figure out next steps together. But an hour later, Jade called Brett. She was at her house, standing on our porch. She wanted to talk to me directly. Wanted to explain everything. Richard and I opened the door. Jade looked small and vulnerable, mascara smudged, wearing oversized sweatshirt. She asked to come in. We sat in the living room. Jade started crying immediately. Said she knew I didn't like her, never approved. But she loved Brett. She'd never hurt him, and I asked her directly for her OBGYN's name. For hospital records from the miscarriage. For medical documentation. Jade said she didn't have to prove anything to me. That her medical information was private. That asking for proof was cruel and invasive. That I told her Brett had asked for the same information. This wasn't about me. It was about him needing verification before marriage. Jade said Brett was being manipulated by his family. That we'd poisoned him against her. Before tonight, he'd trusted her completely. Now suddenly, he was demanding medical records. Richard spoke up. Said there were inconsistencies that needed explanation. Hospital records showing no treatment. Physical signs that didn't match timeline. Previous boyfriend with identical experience. Jade's face changed when Richard mentioned Marcus. Tears stopped. Expression hardened. She asked how we knew about Marcus. Had we been investigating her? Stalking her? I said Marcus contacted us after learning about Brett. Wanted to warn us about a pattern. Jade stood up. Said Marcus was a liar, an abusive ex. That he'd accused her of faking pregnancy when she miscarried, tormented her about it. She'd escaped that relationship traumatized. I stayed calm. Asked again for medical records. If she could provide documentation, we'd never mention this again. Jade said she didn't keep records from 2 years ago. But this pregnancy with Brett had been real. The baby had been real. She shouldn't have to prove her grief. That I pulled out my phone. Showed her photos I'd taken in Brett's apartment. The fake positive pregnancy test. The printed ultrasound with no medical information. Jade stared at the photos. Face went through shock, calculation, anger. She said I'd gone through her trash? Invaded her home? Violated her privacy? I said I was Brett's mother and I was protecting him. Those items raised serious questions. Jade said the positive test was from when she first found out. She'd kept it as memento, then thrown it away after miscarriage. I said the test in the photo was unused. Never exposed to urine. It was fake test purchased online. Jade said I was insane. That I'd clearly bought fake tests myself to frame her. Richard asked calmly, if everything was real, why not provide Brett with doctor's name? One call would verify everything. Jade said she didn't have to prove anything. That demanding proof from miscarriage victim was psychological abuse. That we were gaslighting her. I'd had enough. I'm 52 years old, a nurse for 25 years. I don't play games. That I told Jade directly. There was no pregnancy. No baby.
No miscarriage.
She'd faked all of it to trap Brett. I had evidence. Testimony from ex-boyfriend. Medical documentation that no hospital treated her. Fake pregnancy materials from her trash. Jade stood up, face flushed with rage. Said I was a terrible person. That accusing someone of faking dead baby was evil. That Brett would never forgive me. She said she was going back to Brett, and he'd have to choose. His psychotic mother or the woman he loved. I said go ahead. Brett already knows the truth. He's the one who asked for proof first. Jade's face showed she hadn't expected that. She thought she could drive wedge between Brett and me. Jade left. Slammed our door so hard a picture frame fell. Richard and I sat in silence. Then I called Brett. He was still at his apartment. Said Jade had just called from our house, crying, saying I'd attacked her. Brett said he'd told Jade he needed space. Wanted medical records before they talked. Jade had screamed at him. Said if he needed proof of their dead baby, he didn't love her. She was done. Brett said he told her to leave her key when she went. An hour later, Brett called back. Jade had returned, packed her belongings, left her engagement ring on counter. She'd screamed at him. Said he was weak, controlled by his mother, would die alone. Said she'd wasted 8 months on him. Brett said that final interaction confirmed everything. The woman playing grieving fiancé had transformed into someone vicious. The mask had completely dropped. 2 days later, Brett and I went to his apartment. Jade had cleared out everything, though we found more evidence. A folder with printouts from websites about how to fake positive pregnancy test and pregnancy symptoms by trimester. Bookmarks for sites selling fake ultrasounds. Text messages where Jade told a friend she was working on locking Brett down and pregnancy angle is perfect timing. Brett sat on his couch reading through it all, face expressionless. When he finished, he said he felt like an idiot. I told him he wasn't an idiot. He was a trusting person who loved someone. Jade exploited that. The fault was hers. Brett apologized for not listening. For defending Jade. For making me seem like villain. I told him there was nothing to apologize for. Brett canceled the wedding. Had to tell everyone it was off. He told people he and Jade had grown apart and weren't compatible. Some people didn't believe the real story, thought it was too dramatic. But Brett's closest friends believed and supported him. 3 months later, Jade tried to contact Brett. Sent long email apologizing. Said she'd been under stress, made mistakes, missed him. Wanted to reconcile. Brett showed me the email. I told him it was his choice how to respond. He blocked her number and email. Said he was done. 6 months later, Amy discovered Jade was dating someone new. Found posts where Jade mentioned being exhausted and having cravings, early hints at pregnancy announcement. Amy sent screenshots to Brett. He looked at them, then said he felt sorry for that guy. Brett asked if he should warn the new boyfriend. I said probably the guy wouldn't believe him, but Brett wrote down everything that happened with dates and evidence. Saved it in file. Said if another victim ever reached out, like Marcus reached out to us, Brett would be ready to help. A year later, Brett is doing well. Dating someone new, carefully, slowly. He's in therapy processing what happened. Rebuilding trust. He tells me I saved his life. That if I hadn't investigated, he'd be married to someone who'd trapped him with cruelest lie imaginable. Did I tell him I was just being his mother? That's what mothers do. We protect our children even when they don't want protection. Even when it makes us look like villain. Sometimes love means asking hard questions. Sometimes it means investigating when something feels wrong. Sometimes it means being called controlling and cruel because you refuse to let someone hurt your child. AT52, as nurse for 25 years, I've learned that cruelest manipulations are ones wrapped in sympathy. Fake grief. Fake loss. Fake vulnerability designed to make you feel guilty for questioning. Jade knew exactly what she was doing. Knew faking miscarriage would make her untouchable. Who questions grieving mother? But I questioned anyway. I demanded proof anyway. Because I'm not a monster. I'm a mother protecting my son. And I'd do it again.